It's me, Nimso. Welcome back to another video. It's been quite a while, I know. Probably actually nearly 3 months, I think, since the last video. Sorry about that. I have been quite busy recently in just kind of working. I've mainly been working on VR, obviously. I've mainly been working on Project TX. And I just kind of wanted to start making videos a little bit more recently as well, and that's not super easy when you're mainly working on one specific project. So I just wanted to just make another video. I came across a little bit of a post recently on Twitter, which of course leads to a YouTube video as well, from Gamertag VR. You'll know of him if you know anything about VR, and he made a video talking a little bit about, actually I'll just move over to the video right now. Pop, there we go. Here's the video. Scroll in the wrong place, of course. There we go. That's better. Right. Every VR game abandoned by Meta. This is the title of the video. But I think there's a little bit of speculation on this video. I wanted to just, it kind of reminded me of something. Because obviously I worked on some AAA games, so I just wanted to, I'll put the video up first, the little snippet that got me thinking about making this video, and then I'll talk about it. So let me just press play here.
Facebook Connect the same year, they went on to reveal 2 massive Oculus exclusives from Ubisoft.
And today, we are excited to announce our first AAA franchises for the VR market, which are Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell.
With only one of them coming true in the end, and that was Assassin's Creed Nexus. Now, for those of you who weren't around in VR back then, the hype with this announcement was absolutely unreal. Players could finally feel what it's like to be Sam.
So one thing about that, I do remember the first public mention of both of these projects. It was I think it was in a Facebook Connect, but it was such a quick mention that I don't think there was much. I mean, maybe there was hype. I don't know. People obviously caught on and they started talking about it. But it was such a minimal announcement. I was quite surprised. I think all of us were surprised when we were working, because we were working on the Assassin's Creed project at the time, on Assassin's Creed Nexus. And it was just surprising that how it was like a half-minute segment, just 30 seconds. By the way, guys, we're working on... Oh, well, they never allowed you to say guys. But by the way, people, we are working on Assassin's Creed VR, Splinter Cell VR, blah, blah, blah. Then that's it. That was the whole announcement. It was super simple. But I guess that's all they really needed. People would just jump on it anyway. So let's continue.
And Fisher in VR. But sadly, this never happened, with Ubisoft quietly cancelling Splinter Cell VR as part of a broader cost-cutting move.
Okay, so I'm going to just straight up say I don't think that is accurate information. I think this is speculation. The reason I say that is because I was working on Splinter Cell VR. I was one of a very small group of people who had been moved over to the Splinter Cell VR project before that cancellation. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this project itself. We were obviously originally working on Assassin's Creed Nexus. I had moved to Germany to work with them on these projects. I was invited by my manager, who had been watching my content already, and he wanted me to join that project. So he contacted me. This was the first time I'd ever met him or spoke to him. He just kind of had already seen my videos. That was in 2019. So December 2019 was when I first... there we go. Is that the correct camera? And just switch off the green screen for a bit. So December 2019, that's when I first moved over to Germany. That's when I started at Ubisoft. By around 2020, I think 2021 is when this announcement came up about the games. And I had worked on Assassin's Creed Nexus for about 2 years, maybe. I was only at Ubisoft for 3 years in total. And I had worked on that project between 1.5 years and maybe 2 years before I moved on to Splinter Cell. That was kind of the start of the Splinter Cell VR project. A few of the others had already moved to the Splinter Cell VR project, wherein they weren't already moved over to the kind of new project. I was still working on Assassin's Creed. They had done some prototyping. So there was actually 2 prototypes, kind of prototypes of Splinter Cell related prototypes. The first one was not an actual prototype of that game. The first one was a prototype done in Unity. So Assassin's Creed Nexus was built in Unity. Anyone who plays it, you can probably tell if you know much about Unity itself and how the games feel and look. And anyways, we worked on that game in Unity. Unfortunately, Ubisoft wanted us to move over to their proprietary Snowdrop Engine. And now, if you've seen any Snowdrop projects that have existed now, the only 2 that I kind of know of are, and I mentioned this one already in my other video where I was talking about it, was Star Wars Outlaws. We didn't know that game existed when we were working on this project. By the way, I'm just going to rotate my head a bit. There we go. Resetting my rotation. We didn't really know of that project. I don't think it existed by the time I had left. And what's it called? Avatar. So the Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, that project was already live while we were working on Splinter Cell. So those 2 are games that are from on the Snowdrop engine. That is a proprietary engine at Ubisoft. And we had worked on Assassin's Creed on Unity. So my manager, a few people, wanted to kind of try and prove to Ubisoft that we could do something much bigger, much cooler on Unity, while still moving on to a little bit new technology. Particularly for performance, Unity's ECS, so Entity Component Systems. This was a prototype that they did. They had worked on, it's a very, very simple prototype, right? It was just a character control system with some physics hands, all running on Unity's ECS system, which is it's not the same way of using it as the regular Unity, but they wanted to prove that they could do something with that. And so they were kind of working on that while we were still finishing up on Assassin's Creed. This was around 2021, 2022. And part of that project, and I really want to just jump over here. I'm going to switch into my suit. There we go. I custom built these goggles based on the original ones, right? So, so part of that prototype, they had worked on a little thing that showcased how many physics objects could run at the same time, and it was a little so you can see in one of my videos that I'd done something similar. It was a rubber duck launcher, and I decided I just wanted to kind of we've got a rubber duck launcher here as well. hold on, there we go. It's just it was literally this. Right, it's literally this. That's it. It's a rubber duck launcher, and you could spawn loads and loads of rubber ducks. Okay, hold on. The camera's getting really confused now. There we go. Right, so there we go. Rubber duck launcher. Launch some rubber ducks at Tubby over here. Oh, don't block the camera. So I've just replicated it here. Right, this is just a particle system actually. This rubber duck launcher. Right. Oh no! I pressed the lightsaber button. Sam Fisher's not supposed to have a lightsaber. Okay, get rid of the lightsaber. We're talking about rubber ducks. One of the things they built was a rubber duck launcher that was just showcasing the amount of physics objects you could have in the game. When we were working on Assassin's Creed Nexus, the number of physics objects that were allowed to be active was very, very minimal, which unfortunately means that the game world, the interactivity of it, they had to be very strategic on where physics objects would be placed. One of the things that I did was when I jointed the hands to make the physics hands, that joint is the same joint being used for the hand and then for the grabbed object. Objects don't attach to the physics hand. Instead, the hand just kind of magically attaches to the physics objects. They're the same physics joint. It's a real mess. You might notice my head tracking's a little bit off. I've got a lot of things. Everything's a bit of a mess recently. You know, the tracking's a bit messy. My audio tracking is messy. Everything's messy. Anyways, I'll be back in a sec. Okay, I'm back. Someone is at the door. Deliveries, the usual business. Where was I? Rubber duck launchers. Bum, 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 bum. Let's just shoot a rubber duck at you. There we go. I have to use the leap motion tracking. Everything's a blooming mess. Anyways, yeah. So it's been such a long while that a lot of my tracking setups and stuff need to be updated. I updated things recently, and as a result, now everything's not as smooth as it should be. ... Anyways, yeah. So we were working then on. They were working on this Unity prototype. And thereafter, unfortunately, we did have to move on to Snowdrop. So at that point, I had then started joining the Splinter Cell project, and moved over from Assassin's Creed. Now I was working on the Splinter Cell project, and we worked on Snowdrop. So this is, like I said, I was talking a little bit about the behind the scenes of what kind of happened when that cancellation was announced for Splinter Cell. We had started working on that project in Snowdrop. Now, the thing with Snowdrop, I've talked a little bit about it in that video about the about Star Wars Outlaws, but the thing with Snowdrop is that it wasn't entirely finished, especially not for VR. It was still being modified and fixed and repaired and things behind the scenes. And for VR, it was basically being rebuilt from scratch. It was quite a bare bones engine. There was loads going on in there, but actually using it, especially for VR, was I'm gonna say for me personally, is a nightmare. Because that's the first time I really worked with a proprietary engine. Before that, I've worked with other engines many times, but this was quite new to me. It was also C++. We moved it from Unity with C#, and now we were working in C++. One of the bigger problems with that, you kind of had to rebuild the engine every time you changed some gameplay code. Not super easy. It was a pain in the ass. By the time it got cancelled, we were still just working on it, and we were just told by the manager, by our manager, the same guy that had hired me, that, by the way, news has come from above, we're likely to be putting the project on hold. At that point, we were still working on a basic character controller. I'm going to be honest, it was not a Splinter Cell game at that point. There was, however, on the side of that, another prototype that was built that was actually related to the game, which wasn't, it wasn't just a generic prototype like the rubber duck launcher. I just love the duck launcher. It was more specific. It was an actual Splinter Cell gameplay prototype. And hold on, let me just handle this properly. And that was a proper game, an actual game. You could actually stealth around. It was in VR, but again, that was built. It wasn't built by us on the in Dusseldorf. It was built by the Berlin team. Berlin were heading the game. They were kind of the headquarters for that game specifically, and they were working on prototypes. They used Unity as well, so they just straight up made a game, made a mini Splinter Cell game in Unity as a test prototype to see how the gameplay would work. We were basically just using Unity to do the logic to try and build something that was playable, and then we would have to try and build that in Snowdrop. Excuse me, my head's spinning in game. Oh my goodness. Okay, yeah, you can imagine how the game was just not progressing like we thought it would be. But I don't think any of that was related to this. We suddenly got information. We suddenly got told the game might be put on hold, but carry on working, right? And then after about a couple of weeks, we just got told it's cancelled, right? We didn't know anything else than that. Now, here's some additional information that leads me to believe that this was the reason for it. I don't think it was cancelled for any cost-cutting measures, directly. It was something a little bit different. Basically, the Assassin's Creed Nexus project was going already for about nearly a year before I even joined. annoying as that might be, that we were kind of the only VR specialists being added to the project right at the beginning, so no one really had experience of VR when that project began, which is really annoying because everything that was being built, all the character control systems and stuff like that, it was supposed to be sort of a prototype, but in practice, one of my colleagues told me straight up, look, Nimza, you need to understand how AAA works. Once this prototype is done, no one changes it, okay? It's gonna become the game. And that was going to be really, really difficult for me to understand, because I kind of prototype things and then I build new character control systems and everything off the prototype, and then I build a new one and then a new one. Obviously you can't do that perpetually, but that's how I build things. That's how I do quality control, right? And this was basically a bit difficult to. It was not good in the beginning. It was not functional, not very well functional. They were using the character controller from Unity, like the typical Unity character controller, which is already a nightmare to work with, because for some reason that is a PhysX, NVIDIA PhysX character controller, yet it is not working very well in sync and just doesn't work properly with rigid bodies from PhysX. And of course, they wanted physics hands. So I'm there trying to write physics hands and sync them with the character controller, which does not sync with rigid bodies. It was a blooming mess. We really wanted to redo the starting parts of the project. But what I was saying here was that project basically began about 9 or 10 months before I even began. I began in 2019, right? I want you to do the numbers for me here. I started in the project December 2019. I left Assassin's Creed project around 2022. What was the release date of Assassin's Creed Nexus? Let's find out, shall we? Release date, November 2023, right? I began December 2019, which means right at the beginning of December of 2019 was when that project actually started production. Which means it was about 4 years, or 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. 4 to 5 years the project had been undergoing, which was effectively almost the vast majority of the funding had come from Meta, from what I understand. I might be wrong. And those projects were supposed to take about a year and a half. So it gives you an understanding of how far delayed we were and how much more funding might have been required, particularly in terms of just wages. You're talking massive amounts of extra funding needing to keep that project ongoing for a number of years longer than it was supposed to be. I believe, this is just me, this is speculation in itself, because we never got told the actual reason. I believe that is the reason that this game was cancelled. I mean, they just didn't want us to carry on with Splinter Cell when Assassin's Creed hadn't even released yet and it was already delayed. So that's that, right? That's what I think is the actual reason. And I just came across this video. I wanted to talk a bit about that. But now that I'm touching on things that were happening in development process, I wanted to actually talk a little bit about some of the prototypey stuff that I had worked on. This was completely external to the game. One of the things we got really lucky with was my manager kind of fought a little bit for this. We did have a chance to rewrite the player-related systems so that they would work properly with VR. Oh, I lost audio. One sec. Is it still working? Hopefully it's still working. I hope the audio is working. Anyways, so I'm back. So we had a chance to start working on that a little bit more. And I'll show you this little scene that I had built as a little test scene that I was working on. Because I started rewriting a lot of things specifically as a prototype to test and then showcase what I had in mind to try and get things working as a character controller. So actually in this project, I'm using the same character controller. You can see here two capsule colliders, this one here and this one here. And those are the same ones. This is the same character control system that I'd written for Half-Life Alyx, the recreation that I did. You know, the How It Works video that I did for Half-Life Alyx. This is the same character controller, right? So this moves around ... And it does exactly what the Half-Life Alyx character controller does. You'll also notice these two physics hands over here. In fact, I'm just going to pop it open here. And you'll notice this little blade object here. I will show you this running. This is a project that I built in my own, this on my own system, in my own time. As a test for myself, just to kind of figure out what I would do. What I had in mind to try and rewrite some of the character control systems. And I showed Matt this. He was the sort of lead for the team that I was working with, which is the 3Cs. It was all related to the player controller, character control systems. So I'll run this now and I'll talk about it a little bit there. The hidden blade had already been done before. So this is not my idea or anything. Don't even think about it. This had already been done. I'll show you a bit more of this. And here we are. We're back in. If the visuals are glitching at all or anything, like anything's just going transparent, please ignore that. This is a very old version of the VR, of the Meta VR driver and stuff like that. This project was built in 2020. I looked at the created date, which is when I was doing some prototyping for the stuff like this, for the character controller. So like I said, this is actually running on the same character controller that I built over a couple of days for that Half-Life Alyx How It Works video, where I was describing how things work. You'll notice that actually the room that you're looking at is not a room you've seen before. If you have, then you have, but if you haven't, ignore all the objects and stuff everywhere you look. This is my new office. I've got a lot of work to do. The door needs painting still. There's a lot of stuff to do, but anyways, yeah, so what you're looking at here was just built by me completely from scratch to test out some of the ideas that I had. One of them being the maths for the blade. So basically the blade was already being done, right? This already existed in the game, but the maths were wrong. Sometimes you would just kind of go, ooh, and it would just come out, and you would do that, and it just wouldn't work. So I had to write it proper, and believe it or not, the maths for this is literally a single line of code now. It's super duper easy to get that right. It's like 3 lines of code altogether, just for nice and neatness, and that's it, and that just works properly now, right? Where minimal effort, and that's what is in the game as well. It's basically exactly the same logic, the exact same maths, which I've got right here. This is what it is. It's just simple maths that we had messed up, so I rewrote it so that it would actually work properly. Now you'll notice that I put forearms into this project. This is just for testing. The big problem that you would have had, and we did have this major problem, was when the blade was out, the hand could just go through the blade. Because obviously the blade is not attached to the hand, right? It's attached to the forearm. And obviously this is an official project, so it had to look correct. It had to look like the original games. So what I wrote was a little bit of a custom avatar setup, and we'll talk about the avatar setup in a bit as well after this little bit portion of the video, where please ignore my belly. It's I've been putting on a bit of weight recently. A little bit more VR required very soon. Yes. And so the blade doesn't attach to the hand, which means that I had to do some work on the forearm, make it look right. So here you can see, as I rotate my hand, this is nice and floaty, right? The forearm doesn't directly match what my hand does. It's just kind of floating around. This is a full physics hand, by the way, of course. Yeah, there we go. It collides with things, you know. There we go. You can punch it. Boom, 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 boom. It's all fine, right? Fine and dandy. And you can go right into the wall, bang, bang, bang. I can switch on the controllers. There we go. And you can see these are the old classic controllers. They're not, they're the Quest 1, Quest 2 controller style. Because that's what we were working with, right? So I had to make sure it was looking right. And yeah, you can see I go through there, the physics hand collides, right? So this is actual physics hand. It's not a physics forearm though. So here we go. If I stand here, you can see the forearm goes through the wall. It's just a physics hand. This is exactly how the final game actually is as well. So I wrote a system where the forearm had two sets of calculations. One is the standard forearm, where it rotates nice and smoothly, and this is the standard avatar system that's running all the time. The second would be, once the blade is out, then it would match much more stiffly to the hand. And there's actually a little bit of tilting here. You'll see that the hand can sometimes go close to the blade, right? Here, look, if you look at the point here, close to the blade and outwards, right? So there's a softness to the hand without breaking the physical limitations of that blade, right? So it's really, really nice. And this is exactly what I was prototyping to get it working. Now, one of the things that wasn't in the game before I had built this little thing was the attachment of the blade. Obviously, we were rewriting the blade and physics and stuff, so the attachment of the blade to a physics object or wall was not in there. If I show you the controller right now, you can see I can move my controller around, and there is a soft colliding. There's a soft grip right there on the blade. Here we go, slap, and it is softly grabbed in, right? It's not rotating, it's not pivoting at the correct position, but this was the prototype that I wrote for getting this blade to attach properly. This is a physics joint attaching properly to the object, the wall, or whatever you hit, when the blade is out. And this is actually in the final game. You'll see this kind of mechanic. It's not exactly written as I did it here. It had to be written a little bit differently because the character controller, the characters themselves, the NPCs work a little differently. But this is what I want. Like, you can see the physics limit is a bit broken. Boink, boink. But there you go. Now, another thing that I wanted to put in, this was just a little test thing that we were trying out, was the idea of this was going to be something at a time when people were really, really worried with motion sickness. And you can imagine this is a company that works with accessibility a lot of the time. So motion sickness was something we had to focus on. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to add to try out a new system for deep penetration on walls, right? Now you can see here that this is exactly the same one that I wrote for the Half-Life Alyx How It Works video, because when I go into a wall, you can see it darkens up. Now what I added here was a very simple, if you go far enough, it pops you out, right? It just pops you out the wall, right? I didn't use the stick. Obviously, if you move the stick while you're inside a wall, as soon as I move the stick, it pops you out, right? Same thing. It pops you out either if you go too deep into the wall or if you move the stick, right? This is exactly what I described in the How It Works video. Check the How It Works video out of Half-Life Alyx that I made. This is years ago. It's back in 2020. And the same thing applies here when you're leaning over a table. This was one of the things that they wanted me to do, was to get a leaning system working. Because obviously when you step past here, if I keep the stick moving, you can see I just trying to lean over. It's a real pain. I'm always limited to where the C is on static. I can never reach the blooming C, because as soon as the collider just moves you back. So it's a little bit easier now because I'm actually going into this, right? If I move the stick, you can see the collider actually pushes me out, right? That's where the actual collision is. So what I have here is just the same thing that I had in the Half-Life Alyx project, except it detaches when you go a little bit too deep, right? It jumps you back out, boop, like that. So I tried out something a little bit different, which doesn't immediately jump you back out. Instead, I wanted to try something that would be soft. So here we go, I move in and it slowly pushes me out. So here we go, I'll show you. And you can see that I'm not moving my physically out. The sticks are not being pressed. I move in and it slowly pushes me out, right? So that's a soft collision right there. I can go right on in here and it's a little bit squeezier when I get too deep inside, so it moves me as fast as it can. The same thing applies here. So go into a wall and it pushes me out smoothly, right? This is just something that I was trying. It's exactly the same system as Half-Life Alyx, except with a smooth relief. So if I do move the stick, it still jumps me out immediately, right? This was just something I was prototyping, and you can see it's a quite cool cool idea. I don't think this ended up in the game, but this was one of the things that I was trying. Avatar systems, as I mentioned here, the blade, the stickiness, all affecting how the avatar positioning works, right? This sort of softness to the pinch here, all of that, avatar systems. So I really wanted to make a prototype on how to handle avatar systems as well, how to get the full body presence there, because they really wanted, I really wanted to just go full for forearms only, but it was kind of required that we would have full body visuals on in the game, because you could choose you could play as different characters throughout the game. So let's jump over to a different prototype that I did. Again, this was just for the sake of making a video so that I could show what I was planning in terms of how I would write the avatar system, the visuals system for Assassin's Creed Nexus. And here we are. Okay, so before we start, I'm actually going to switch back to a regular character. Hey, look, you can see my eyes. That's good. Right, okay, yeah. VR tracking, hand tracking is all working nicely. Beautiful. Okay, here we go. It's not VR tracking. This is leap motion, actually. But there we go. So, here we are. We're in a project that I was making. Just to explain what was going on. Okay. I joined Ubisoft. I joined the Assassin's Creed project. I was going to go in and do a little bit of work on the physics hands, right? They had a file called the Grabber, right? It's a script, a C# script called Grabber. Now, Grabber is supposed to be a physics hands and grabbing objects, supposed to handle all of those things. It wasn't just doing that. This thing was 2,000 lines of code, way too big. It was bloated, and bloated is like the key word when you're talking about AAA game development. Everything's bloated. It's the beauty of it. It's not beautiful at all. It was bloated, okay? It was doing way too many things. It was doing the physics hands. It was doing the grabbing. It was doing avatar stuff. It was doing IK. It was handling the body and a bunch of things, you know, the elbow. A bunch of code inside there was doing some of the hidden blade stuff. There was too many things happening. There were too many things happening in one file, in one script file, to give you an understanding of how unnecessary this is and how overcomplicated it becomes. You've seen Project TX, you've seen on my video channel, you've seen all the physics hand stuff that I've done. Those physics hands use something that I call, well, it's a tracked physics object, right? Basically, I take the tracking controller, which is it's just data. It's a position and a rotation in space. And then I use that tracking data. I have a physics tracked object system that makes the physics object follow the tracked hand, right? So you take the VR tracking, you've got a physics object that follows the tracked hand. And it does so using physics. Very simple, it works fine, and it looks great. I've written quite complex sets of systems to handle all of the edge cases, to add limitations and all of these really clever restrictions into my physics hands over time. The latest version of this, I just had a look, right, on Project EX as it stands in the last video you've seen. That is 400 lines of code in total. That's all of the physics hand stuff, right? That doesn't just handle the physics hands, it handles a bunch of other physics objects. And then on top of that, for my systems, I have what I call a muscle. The muscle handles, you know, jointed physics objects while simultaneously they're being tracked about by using the other tracking physics object. And the muscle is 80 lines of code. It's really as simple as you can get. Your aim with it as a coder is to simplify as much as you can. Your files should never get that big. They should always be minimized in the amount of stuff that you're working with. It makes it easier for you to work with. It prevents bloat. You can optimize a lot better when you're doing that. So I have the physics tracking objects, which handles, you know, the objects that are tracking positions in space that I can determine. That thing was 400 lines of code to handle all of the edge cases. The muscles, which were handling about 80 lines of code, they handle all the muscles, actually, rotations. You can't really see arms on this character, but rotations of things that connect to each other. And then obviously I have a physics rig, which puts it all together and builds up a body using all of those components, right? These things all together will probably only be about 500 to 600 lines of code. This thing, this grabber, which is supposed to be just doing physics hands with grabbing objects, is 2,000 lines of code. Why? It's so bloated, it's unnecessary. So working with that was going to be a real pain in the butt. Now, it wasn't just grabber and physics hands that I was working on. Obviously, you saw in the little VR bit that I just showed you, and that I was doing a lot of the physics hand stuff. But I was also doing the forearm. I was also handling a bit of the avatar things. Now, one of the things, this is going to sound a bit like tooting my own horn. I've said that plenty of times on this channel. But when I got to, this is really cool. This is a little fun little bit of detail. I got to the project, and this is even before I had started at Ubisoft. I looked in Microsoft Teams. We were using Microsoft Teams, and I looked in the documentation and explanations and references, and they were using a bunch of videos. They were posting a bunch of videos on there saying, look, this is how we want to try and make our avatar system look. This is how we want to try and copy in terms of physics. And a bunch of those videos were mine. Yeah, just linking to my videos before I even joined the company. That's a win. That's a win. Okay. Yeah, I know it sounds a bit up myself, but it's the truth. It's the truth. It's really cool, right? So they were looking at my videos. So obviously I'm there now. I can actually help and detail these things. So what you're looking at is a prototype I was showing. And I used this to make a little video to explain things as to how I would be working on them. Now, what you're looking on the left, on the right hand side, we'll look at that first. The way that I handle VR, right? I never build anything on top of the avatar system. This is the avatar. Avatar being the visual representation of the character that you see, you as the player. You're going to see the visual representation of the character, which is this dude here, right? I'm going to switch him off. Ta-da, magic. What you're looking at here is what I call the VR rig. Now, it's called tracking rig in here because when I was working at it on it in Ubisoft, they wanted to call it the user rig. User, as in you're the user, you're the person playing, rig, which is kind of half logical. For me, it makes more sense to call it a VR rig. Sometimes in my more recent work, it'll be called an XR rig, which, to be honest, it's a bad term. But this is the tracking rig. Because what comes in from the VR hardware is 3 points. Hold on, let me see how that looks in here. 3 points. No, I have to use 4 on my real hand. 3 points, right? Oh, my tracking camera. Okay. The first point is the camera, the headset, right? Which is this. It's actually this point here. This is where your headset would be in reality, right? The second point, your tracking hand, your controller, left controller, and then your right controller. These are the 3 things that actually come in from VR hardware. If I was to move them out, right, you would see it's literally just these 3 points. That's it. This is everything you get from the VR hardware. And you're supposed to go from that, right, to building an avatar that can move around and actually look quite humanoid. So you can imagine, for people who don't have much experience with VR, that is a pain in the ass, right? Pardon my language, but that's a pain in the ass. It's very difficult to go from the 3 points and calculate and figure out how to do all of these things all at once. You have to spend a lot of time working on it. Lucky for me, I've spent a little bit of time working on it. So how I do it, this is how I start. The first thing I do is I go from my tracking position, right, which is the hardware. Now, one of the things I'm going to say here, and I'll come back to it, trust the VR hardware. The VR hardware is the truth. That's it. The VR hardware is the truth. Where the controller is, that's where the controller is. Where the headset is, that's where the headset is. That's it. Accept it as the truth. You might have unstable hardware. It'll get better. It is the truth. It's the ground truth. So this is guaranteed. 100% certain. I know that the tracking headset is there. I can calculate then from there where the head is. because I know your head is attached directly, statically, solidly to the headset. Okay, so behind your headset is your head. That's where the head is. This is what I calculate to be the neck. You can see here, user's neck, right? That is the neck pivot. Why? I calculate the neck, I go back from the headset, I get the head, I go back from the head downwards, and I get the neck. I calculate these as quite solid pieces to the head tracking, and I say this is the baseline truth, right? So now if I was to tilt this neck, you can see the whole head tilts around on top of it. And then you can of course tilt the head itself, right? So now we've got a nice little clever neck rig going on, and we can use that later on. Then we also have the controllers. So here we go, we've got a controller position here. And if I was to rotate it, you can see the whole hand moves around. Now the box, what the box denotes is where that controller actually is. What I would normally do is I would go backwards from the controller, slightly down and slightly outwards away from the body. So in this case here, the red axis, outwards from the body, right? And that's what I would do to find out where the wrist is. So here we go. This is what the wrist would actually look like. For this project, I'm just doing a simple sample. So that's this. Now you can see what it's labeled. It's labeled here, IK point L, left, right? So this is the left IK. I've lost audio for a second. I'll be back in a moment. Bum, 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 bum. And there we go. You'll have seen the image stuttered it for a moment as well. And there we go. Audio's back. Right. So this is the left IK point, right? This is where I would attach the IK, the visual representations, arm and hand and wrist and stuff, to this position here. This is not coming from tracking. This is calculated from tracking. Here's the tracking. Here's the IK point. And that is supposed to be my wrist, right? That's what I'm imagining is the wrist. The only point we get from hardware is this, but I can guarantee that my hand's pretty solid, right? So where the wrist is going to stay pretty stable. That's where the wrist is, and that's what I'm going to work with. And that the same thing here. On the right hand, you've got the wrist, right? So this is what I do. I take in the 3 points there we go. I take in these 3 points, and I calculate what these other points are. I calculate from the head tracker where the head is, where the neck is. I calculate from the hand, from the controller, where the palm is and where the wrist is. And those are the things I'm going to use for Avatar IK and for all of our gaming systems. Remember, I can delete the avatar and these VR systems still remain in place. I still have a neck position. I still have a wrist position. These are things that I'm calculating for the purpose of VR functionality, right? I'm building a game using these points, not using the visual representation that you see here. This visual representation is the final stage. It's the visuals. The entire game should function without it. Of course, this wasn't happening. A lot of people, when they're starting with VR, they start building these systems like they would in a normal game, and then their visual representation starts having some mechanics sitting on top of them. And you can imagine, if you start attaching objects to the visual representation of the hand, and I want to smoothly move the visual representation of the hand around, it's going to affect where the physics object is. The problem is the visual representation of the hand is not physics. So you're jointing a physics object sitting on top of a palm, which is not physics. You end up with stutter, you end up with instability, everything starts shattering, everything starts breaking when you start doing things like that. You must never attach your functionality, your VR function, to your visual avatars. Do the work behind the scenes. No one ever saw these points. You know, these points, these boxes and these tracking points. No one ever saw that when they played Assassin's Creed Nexus, but they're there. They're under the hood. They are called the user rig in Assassin. If you look at that game, that's called the user rig. That exists. Okay? This exists. Those 3 things are 3 points in space that are coming directly from the VR hardware. Those are what I call guaranteed points. They are ground truth, like I said. Right? So what happens then is you go from there and you build your avatar on top of that. Obviously, I actually build physics first, and then I build an avatar. I actually made a lecture about this internally when we were working on Splinter Cell. I had a little lecture. It was a couple of hours it took, where I described how I would handle these things, and I show how I actually build the rigs, and how we would do that for the game. So here we go. I'm running this project now, and you can see I've got a few little sliders, right, that control a few things. So this top slider here is the position of the head, and that vertically changes position. Now I want to show you something very, very immediate. Click, 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 click. Notice that as I immediately move the head tracker vertically up and down, right, the entire body of the character moves instantly. It is immediate. It matches the head repositioning directly, immediately. That is because, like I said, we have a guarantee, 100% certainty of where the head tracker actually is, where the head is, and therefore where the neck is. And that neck is what's actually being tracked. This neck position here, the neck pivot here, is what's being tracked to allow for the rotation of the head. And that's what means, what that means is that I can rotate the head from that pivot, right? From that pivot, I can rotate it. And you can see that matches what the head is doing on the character. And you can see here, this is what the VR would look like in this little box underneath my control window, right? This is what you would see from VR. And you'll notice here immediately that as I jump the value instantly up and down, right? Instantly the head rotates and matches it. Again, 100% guarantee. The data that's coming in from the VR headset is the truth. It is where the head rotation is. I think I lost audio again. I've got a lot of driver problems. I'm going to fix this one day. I think I'm going to have to reinstall Windows. I've tried to fix it. Nothing ever fixed it. Anyways, so this is immediate, right, on the head. But you'll notice that the upper body, which is being calculated, is being generated from all of these tracking points, is not immediate. So even if I hold if I pause the game right here, and then I'm going to update this, instantly you can see the head has rotated. But I'm going to go frame by frame. Watch the body here. Watch the body. Click, 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 click. Did you notice that? Right. I'll show you in the other view. So here we go. Instantly within one frame, the head has rotated, and then watch how the head stays in the same rotation as well, and the body will rotate. So here we go. I'm going to step frame by frame. You see that? The body looks like it's moving completely independent from the head. That's because I can smooth the body, because that's not guaranteed. I have no guarantee as to what the body looks like. Right? I can smooth the body, but I can't smooth the head, because I have 100% guaranteed ground truth. This is what the head is rotated to look like, right? So this is how I do things. I'm running backwards. You start with the head tracker, right at the front, the headset. This is the truth, the absolute baseline truth, the data coming in from the hardware. You go backwards, you calculate where the head is. You go backwards, you calculate where the neck pivot is. This is stored on the VR rig. It is the ground truth. And then you've got these clever calculations that are going to adapt based on the game. This is why they're not sitting in the VR rig. These avatar positions are not sitting in the VR rig and then being copied over, right? We're going backwards. We calculate what the chest looks like. We have a little bit of smoothing. It's nice and beautiful, right? We go backwards from there. We calculate where the spine is rotating. You see how it's twisting the body. That's fine. Even as you lower your body, you've got the same thing going on. Here we go, right? You lower your body, the whole spine moves backwards. The hip moves backwards, but the head is instant. It knows what it's doing, right? You're going backwards, you're moving outwards, and then you've got all of these tracking points. And then your IK is being built from your shoulder, which of course your shoulders can lift up and down. Your shoulders can go forward and back, right? So again, same thing. It's really cool. You can move your shoulders back and forth. You can move your shoulders up and down. But you'll notice that when we do that, the hands don't move, right? So here we go. Shoulder moving up and down, hand stays in place. Shoulder moves forward and back, hand stays exactly in place. Why? Because the hands are 100% guaranteed. We know where the controllers are. This is why you build your VR rig completely independent from the avatar, from the visuals, right? It's beautiful how it works in the end. You build it completely independent. You can see that hip can go wherever it wants to, you know, whatever, right? And then what I can also do is I go into my IK manager here. I've got the feet. So here we go. Look at the feet. So these feet, the thing with the feet is that they are the furthest away from actual tracking. We don't have the data at all. We just don't have reliable data to describe what the feet look like at all. They're just so far from our tracking data, from our hands and from our head. That's the only data we have. So getting the feet is basically entirely animated, which means there are no controls that impact them. Literally rotating my head has no impact on them. Moving up and down has no impact on them. Moving my shoulders has no impact on them. These things are basically entirely animated, right? And there's a clever thing going on with those as well. So here we go. Let's have a look very, very closely at what happens when I lift my character. So my character stands up, and then they're at full stance, and as it pushes higher, so there's a clever little thing going on. This is something that I wanted to write. This was just for the showcase, so it's really quickly written. It's not happening, it's not working brilliantly. And you can see that the toe bends and goes into a tiptoe as the player gets pulled further away from their feet, right? So this is happening live on the foot, at the foot position. Here we go. As I push my foot out, watch what happens. It's not controlled by the body, it's controlled by the foot. It pushes out, it tries to stretch towards that point. Actually, the IK is being a bit broken because I'm over the IK point. So this is the blue IK point here. Here we go. This is the IK point for the knee. So if I move the foot now, back to where it was, whoop, and then I control this knee. Here we go. This is the IK helper. You can control the knee. Beautiful, right? Let me just lift it up here so that it doesn't get all twisted. And then we do this with the foot again. So now look, the foot goes to a full stretch, and then whoop, the foot tiptoes out and points towards where the tracking base is. This is a tracking base. This is just what we're animating. We animate this point like this. Right? So we animate the foot. And then you get a walk cycle. You animate just that IK target. IK target, you animate maybe the IK helper as well, and you get that animation. Now, if you look carefully at the wrist here, look at this wrist. Remember when I said the IK point is where the actual hand is being tracked from. So now if I move the IK point, look at that hand. The hand moves from the IK point. This is where the VR controller is. The VR controller doesn't matter because we're moving backwards, we're calculating where the IK point should be, where the wrist should be, and we're using the wrist as data point for the avatar. And that's actually what I use for the VR physics as well. This is why on the VR rig, you need to calculate where that wrist is. You can't do it on the avatar. You have to do it beforehand so that your physics can copy that and then your avatar can copy your physics. Right here, we don't actually have the physics in here in this project to test, but that's how it would happen. Now, of course, you have one major problem, which is when you get real low, you have to decide what the game is going to do, right? What are we going to do when the character's so low that they start squishing? So here we go. Boom. What do you do? What do you want to do here? So what you can do, you can move the feet out of the way, right? You can do that. You can do this. And of course, that still causes a problem. You still have the same problem. Do you want crawling in the game? Do you want to limit the character here? Or do you want it so that when the character goes so low, you just make your entire body invisible? Boom. Are we just doing that? You know, because now you don't have the problem, right? You look down and you can see in the VR view, you don't have this problem anymore. You can't see the character. As soon as you stand up high enough, you bring him back. There we go. There's no problem. So that's game design. That part, it's not about the IK. It's about what do you actually want me to do with the IK? What do you want my character to look like when I crouch that low? Do you want to allow crawling in the game? We need to visually represent things so that the player understands, but this is what you do behind the scenes. You have to do all of this work. I wanted to show you this project. It's what I used to showcase what I would do to try and build this new avatar system. I'm so glad that we had an opportunity to rewrite things, because otherwise none of this would be possible. right? I wrote a custom character controller after the one in the game as it existed was just not good enough. I wrote that. I wasn't even able to implement it because it was just so bloated, the actual project. Terry, one of the absolutely great guy, and he managed to get it in. Excellent work. He's probably watching this video, by the way. Yeah, if you're still at Ubisoft, you know, amazing. Thank you so much for getting this in, right? Getting the character controller in. Once that character controller was in, which was running on underlying physics objects, even though they weren't using simulated physics, then I was able to get the physics hands in, the new physics hands. Then I was able to get the visual avatars and stuff. I was able to modify, and of course loads of people were working on all of these little things to make better systems. So mainly a lot more of my work went into the forearm and the physics of that and the baseline of the avatar, and thereafter people were adapting that. They were animating it differently. They had an animated point on the hand, which is what the grabbed object actually sits on. So we can actually, the designers can animate how the physics object is held in the physics hand. It's beautiful, right? Again, this is all great game design. Anyways, thanks so much for watching all of this insanity. I know it's probably a 1 hour video now. We're going to switch that off. We're going to switch the camera over to here. We're going to do this. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've had a chance to look at some of the cool things behind the scenes, to understand a little bit more of how much complexity there is in game development as a whole, and then how much more complex it gets for doing VR, right? Which is why, especially AAA, especially if they're going to pour hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, of thousands of pounds, millions of pounds and dollars into this, they are going to have to do a lot of risk assessments for VR as opposed to regular game development. And this is why I believe these other games just were never going to get to market. They were never going to continue pushing them when they were really struggling with that first project. And it succeeded, right? I'm not saying it didn't. It finished, it released. I'm probably going to do a video where I'm playing the game. Maybe I'll do it on stream. I would love to do it on stream. Play the game and respond to things, and maybe hopefully we'll find Jeffrey in there. He was a character that you don't know about. It's a little Easter egg character, Joffrey. Well, I hope he's in there. I was told he was going in, but I had already left the company at that point. So I don't know. The game released after I left. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I'm gonna keep rambling on. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, which might be about VR, might be about something else. Goodbye.